Most people only stay superficial. Why? Because we don't know how to go deep. We don't know how to approach ourselves. That's why we prefer to stay superficial. But without knowing oneself, we can't really communicate. In other words, knowing oneself completely is the true communication. One must be able to communicate with oneself. So, is that possible for one to communicate at each moment? Which means that the mind stays open without any defense. So the mind is really observing, not only outwardly, but also deep inwardly. To have that state of communication, we must approach ourselves to go deeply into the psyche to find out what we are actually. It is not easy for most people. Why? Because we are too verbal, aren't we? We so rely on words to express. Now we are also seeking positivities from words. So our life is so dependent on words. But words are not a thing. To go into ourselves is to go beyond the verse. Because this true state is beyond any description. But most of us are trying to find satisfaction from verse, from a theory, from a philosophy, from some quote or descriptions. And our thinking is also very verbal. Is that possible for us to put aside all the verse, to really look at ourselves? And most of us are so dependent on verse, and we don't know how to look. We always rely on the verse as a filter to see everything. And therefore, we have lost the capacity to look, to perceive. Can we look at a thing without a verse? Can one look at a person without any associations? Can one look at oneself without a past? It is a very practical question for each of us. Because we always look through the verse, through the experiences. Just like this microphone here. Can you look at it without the word microphone? Just see the color. Without thinking about the function. Or when you are walking in the park, can you look at the tree without being filtered by any low knowledge about that tree? The name, the species, and all kinds of botanical knowledge about it. Can that not block you from seeing the tree? You can touch it. You can touch the leaves, see the color. But can you see it without any verse? That's the practical challenge for each one of us. Can we go through this state of being verbal so we can really see something non-verbal together? We rarely think together, don't we? Everyone thinks about something different. But thinking about something is different from thinking. And why do we always think about something? We have our purpose, intention, ambition, and we always want to be something, to achieve something. And that's the content of the thinking, right? We always think about ourselves. And therefore, we are so self-concerned, so self-centered. And it is impossible to think together in that way of thinking. So to go deeper into ourselves, we have to examine this very fundamental topic. Thoughts. What are thoughts? Obviously, this whole civilization is worshipping thoughts in all kinds of ways. And for our life, thoughts are so important. But we rarely question, are they really important or not? We keep thinking about our dreams, our ambitions, our benefit. And we become more and more divided, separate. Because thoughts are always divisive. That's why we become so and so divided, individual, fragmented. And it is becoming more and more difficult to meet. You have your ambition. I have my own taste. Now, how can we meet? So, is that possible for us to think together? Not think about something. thinking deeply has no object. No, think about something. Think deeply is to go into the issues, the root of it, and examine it, and then see whether it is true or not. And in this occasion, can we see together those knowable things? They do really exist, but they are beyond any verse. Can we come upon them together? And only when we are seeing things together, see the same thing, there's real deep connection as human beings. To go deeply requires a mind to be genuinely humble. But that's something very challenging for most of us because we have been so into ourselves, so self-concerned, that we have created a lot of images about ourselves. We try to find satisfaction from those images about ourselves. And this becomes the very blockage for the mind to be humble. Because to be humble implies that the mind must set aside all those images, all those filters, so we can really look at ourselves as what we are actually. So you see, to go into ourselves requires a lot of work. We have to put aside all the vanities, all the hypocrisies, so we can really quietly and adequately examine ourselves. That's why it is so important to live a life in goodness. Living in goodness requires a humble mind, an unpretentious state of the mind. But you see, it is more and more challenging to live a life in goodness in a society which denies goodness in every respect. When one is really living in goodness, one will find that everything is turning against him or her. But without living in goodness, the mind is always superficial, trapped in its own vanity, and can't really go further into ourselves. So this moment, can we put away all the things, everything human beings have created, so we can go into this question: what are thoughts? What are thoughts? Thoughts are the response to the memory. That's it. Human minds are very capable of thinking, using a lot of thoughts. We have invented a lot of things. I think this room is full of all kinds of human inventions. Thoughts are marvelous. And to live a life in society, we must have some thoughts as knowledge. But psychologically, why do we give such an important value to thoughts? When we look at the content of thoughts, they are other images or symbols, the words, or any organized thoughts like ideas, theories, philosophies. Why is the mind always occupied by those thoughts? We don't condemn thoughts. We don't say we shouldn't have thoughts, but we just inquire to understand why the mind is so occupied by thoughts. Is that because we are afraid of being nothing? So we always want something in the head to give us a sense of me. I exist. I'm something. I'm worthwhile. So the mind is always holding on to some thoughts to avoid that emptiness. And when one looks into this content of the thoughts, what are the content? It is all about me. My name, my house, my dog, my bike, my money, my salary, my education, my family, my title, my company, my career, my life, my suffering, my issues. The mind is occupied by all those things. And which bring a sense of me, a sense of self-importance. Because the mind is always occupied by this content, so this sense is always being enhanced. It's always abiding. And we think that is me. Me really exists. So this whole world is worshipping this self-importance. And we all believe that the me exists. And based on that, we develop all kinds of philosophies, theories. The egoism, the individualism, and all the commercialism and consumerism is based on this as well. So the me is everywhere. But does the me really exist or not? When the mind is always occupied by these thoughts, this sense of me is always there. Unless one is really serious to look into this issue, is that possible to empty the me? Is that possible to not let the mind be occupied by all the me stuff? If one hasn't really gone into that, the belief of the existence of the me is deep rooted. And with that belief, we always scratch the surface. We go to different groups, practice different methods, or, or talk to different psychologists, or try different therapies. But issues are never solved. All of our life challenges, all of the mental challenges, all the problems come from the me. The self, the ego, is the source of all challenges. But most of us don't really go into that. We just merely accept that the self is there. It is always existing. And for most of us, life is a struggle to deal with endless issues. And our energy is wasted in dealing with these endless issues because they are endless. So it's a trap. It's a loop. And the mind is always occupied by different things to avoid, to forget, to exclude. But the issues are always there because the self, the sense of me, never despairs. And we cling to that sense of me, don't we? Because the me also brings some pleasure. We try to find satisfaction from the positive image about myself, all the achievement, all the progress. a part of this pleasure I want to derive from. So this is our life. On the one hand, we suffer from the personal issues. On the other hand, we also take pleasure from the me. So it has become a constant struggle to keep adjusting ourselves for more pleasure and for less pain. But it is never achieved. So is that possible? To go into the self a little bit, to see whether it's possible to empty the me now. Whether it is possible to live a life without the self. At the beginning of the session, we inquired, living a life in goodness is very important. Where there's the self, goodness is not. The self, the self-centered concern, the ego, denies goodness totally. Is that possible for one to live a life without being hindered, deceived by the self? And to be in that state, we must solve all the issues. Not the particular personal issues, all the issues in our life. Come back to the thinking and the thoughts. For most of us, we tend to think about something all the time. In that thinking about something, there is a thinker. Think about something else. Right? It sounds very convenient, very easy. Right? There's a thinker. The thinker is thinking about something. And for other issues, like anger, the thinker is also thinking about the anger, because the thinker notices that the anger is an issue and want to get rid of the anger. So the thinker thinks the anger is something different from the thinker, and I want to do something about it. But what is the thinker? The thinker is the center, isn't it? It's the image about me. my past experience, my knowledge, my images about myself, my experiences. So the thinker is some images. And what is the anger? Is there something, is it something different from the thinker at all? Or the anger itself is the thinker? Those images create a wall and thinks the anger is something different from those images. But they are all taking place in the head, in one body. I wonder whether you notice this very subtle but very important difference. The thinker thinks the anger is something different from the thinker. But the fact is that the thinker is the anger. The anger is the thinker. So this is the practical challenge for each of us, because we always think as a thinker with those images about me, about myself. Therefore, the mind is always treating things as something external, like the society we mentioned last week in the session. Always think that society is something external. Also the anger, all the issues as something external. So that way of thinking creates division between the thinker and the thought. But actually, there is no thinker at all. All the thinker is the thought. The thought is the thinker. But most of us always thinks in this dualistic way. There's division between the me and the things outside me. So the me is always wanting to do something about the issues. I need to get rid of my anger, my loneliness, my issues. And the me is always looking for solutions. But because the me, I don't really notice the real issue. That's the division between the me and the issues. The me is the issue. The me is different from the issues. It's never different from the issues. So when I realize that I am the issue, the ego is the issue, what can I do? The anger is me. I'm the anger. I'm no different from the anger. When I really see that, not as an idea, but it's a fact. I'm the anger. The anger is me. I can do nothing about it. So I do nothing. And see what will take place. The mind no longer makes efforts. Doing nothing means makes no efforts. and all the issues are solved. Finished. You must test it out for yourself. It's so simple. But if the mind still says that the issue is beyond me, it's something external, the mind is always want to do something about it. Therefore, the mind isn't paying attention to the real issue, the division between the me and the issue, which are one. So that's why we are always making effort to solve issues. But the issues are created by the effort, by this division between the me and the things. Because most of us are look at things through verse, through images, which creates this division between the thinker and the thought, the observer and the observed. But actually, the observer is the observed. When you realize that you are the issue, the loneliness, the problem is you can do nothing about it. Then just do nothing. Make no efforts. See what takes place. But look at this world. The society is trapped in the egoism. The mind is always making efforts to solve something. It never noticed that it itself is a troublemaker, always creating issues. So we are making effort to solve the issues that we are creating. It's a loop. It's a circus. Never ends. Unless the mind really stops and look and learn and find out it's an illusion. It's a disorder. It's a loop. The mind is suffering from all kinds of challenges. We don't really investigate what is the source of the problems. We only want to get to the problems because the mind, the ego, thinks the issues are different from the issues, from the ego. But actually, the ego and the issues are one. The anger, the loneliness, the aggression, the confusion is the ego. But because we use verse, the verse gives a sense of a separation. Ego is ego, anger is anger. But actually, in actual fact, they are the same thing. That's why it is so important to go beyond the verse. The knowable things, which are the truth, is beyond the very limited description. So, in this egocentric mode, the mind keeps making efforts, wanting to achieve more, to get more, to be something more important, something greater. And the ego, this self-centered state, generates more and more thoughts and trapped further into more and more thoughts. And in this society, everywhere on this planet, people are trapped in the self, isolated by the self, by all those thoughts, with the ambition, effort, suffering, all the rest of it. And it's becoming so difficult to meet simply. Because we don't know how to look at each other. The mind has been so conditioned to the ego, to its own thoughts, its own pleasure, its own dreams, its own issues. And we have no relationship at all. What is relationship? Are we really related or not? What it means to be related? For most people, relationship means something different. I have an image about you, and you have an image about me. And there's a relationship between the two images. And we all conform to the images, the impressions, or whatever. Husband, wife, friend. They are all these images. Because we don't look at people as what they are, actually. We only through the image we have about the other side. So this human relationship is reduced to images. And we hold on to that images. And we don't want to change. And we don't want to see the change. So there are so many family issues, issues between friends, issues between colleagues. Actually, it's the issues of the human relationship. Because we are all trapped by images. And we don't really see people afresh. Can one observe, see another people afresh without any associations? For example, your family or your friend. Can you see him or her afresh? Not through the knowledge or experience you have accumulated, but just simply fresh. If we can do that, there won't be any issues in the relationship, right? Because it's fresh. But if it's still the past experiences, either pleasurable or very painful, and in this egocentric world, the pain usually is much more than the pleasure. So we have less and less relationship. So is that possible for one to really see another person afresh? You can try it. Observe your associations. Observe your reactions. Can you let go all the images, all the thoughts, all the ideas about the other? Can you treat everything in the same way, afresh, by observing your thoughts, observing your reactions? Do it. Not think about it. Do it. See what takes place. Very simple. Do it. You must act. You can't imagine now. Because when you are acting, that's something real. But if you are thinking, you are imagining something, it is always something elusive. But most of us are rather lazy. We depend on thinking, imagining, and we don't act. Because we think that thinking can always replace the actual action. But that's not the case at all. So this life demands your action, not always thinking about something, dreaming about something. And when you are really acting, you end the continuity of the thoughts. But when you don't do that, the mind is always thinking about something, its own dream, its own illusions. And this world, as we are looking now, is becoming so verbal. The words carry the thoughts. Thoughts are expressed via verse. And when we go outside, see the people keeps talking, chatting all the time. So our life is so easily surrounded by thoughts. Too easy. But, but an authentic life is not easy because one must go through the verbal things and stay authentic, not trapped by verse. See the illusion of the me, the ego. Embodying everything psychologically. Thoughts as knowledge, it has a place for your work, for your profession, for your daily living. But psychologically, thoughts have no place at all. Can we empty everything psychologically? And you can't imagine it. You can only know what it's like when you really do it. Is that possible to totally abandon the self? See the futility of it, negate it. Because to the speaker, I hope also to you, living a life without any issues is a top priority. The speaker finds that any issue in life only corrupts life. So he's very serious to deal with every issue with care. Because, this authentic life, a peaceful life, a joyful life, a life with wisdom and intelligence demands diligence, demands hard work. When the mind has no issues at all, there's freedom. The mind feels free. Not this nonsense called freedom boosted by the society, the permissiveness. Everyone can do what they want, doing all kinds of nonsense, all kinds of ridiculous things. That's not freedom. The real freedom comes from state of mind, where there's no ego at all. So the mind has no hurt, no issues. That's the freedom. But this whole world is boasting of the economic freedom or political freedom. That's rather something very superficial. Look at these politicians. They are suffering a lot. They are not happy at all. They have their own tremendous issues, which called privacy. We don't know the issues, but actually the issues are hidden in the privacy. the so-called privacy. So this external freedom we are having in this society can bring a sense of pleasure, but the mind is not free. Therefore, the mind can't really enjoy freedom. So can one set the mind free? Which means that can the mind have no issue whatsoever? It is a very, very practical question, isn't it? Very practical. If the mind has an issue, the issue interferes with everything I do. So I must live a life without any issues. So I must see the root of the issues. The root of all issues, not one or two particular issues, all the issues. As we inquire today in the session, it is the me, the ego. The ego is full of efforts, struggle, control, suppression. And the ego is always rationalized, right? Using new theories, new philosophies, new fanciful ideas, creating numerous self-deception. But the issues are never solved. That's the real issue. And when the self is really gone, life is only at this moment. Naturally, you don't need to make effort to say, I must live at this moment. Then the effort still is the ego thing. When the ego is really gone, life is only at this moment. And freedom is also at this moment. But the mind is always escaping, isn't it? The ego is always want to escape into something called the future. I will be better. I will be stronger. So that hope implies there's something called tomorrow. Can give you something satisfaction. But when the ego is finished, it's gone. There's no tomorrow at all. Life has no tomorrow. Only now. And the real life is only now. I think that's enough for this 1 hour talk.